Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Gone Fishing. I'm your host, Connor, CEO at Phin, and I am joined once again by the amazing Will Brooks, channel chief at FifthWall. Will, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Connor?
Oh, if I were any better, I'd be having twins.
Aren't you having twins?
I am. I actually, the backstory on that, some guy I had a video call with in the midst of COVID right when it started said, if I were any better, I'd be a twin. And I was so used to everyone just giving I'm good. Today's okay. It's like, doesn't sound like you mean that. So you don't have to lie to me.
There was a guy at my church who, whenever you asked him how he was doing, he'd look at you really confidently and say, better now. It just made you feel so good.
Better having met you. It's like, are you sure about that? You don't know me.
You don't even know me.
That's one of my favorite things to say. Anytime I meet somebody, they're like, oh, it's great to meet you. I immediately respond with, you don't know that. I could be the worst person you've ever met. The best response to that, so if anyone's listening, this is how you should respond. It's been nice so far. It's like, okay, I can't argue.
Can't argue with that.
Or anytime somebody says, have a good day, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah. It's like, whenever anyone tells me to do anything, I say, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah. Have a good day. And the change to that's been, I hope you have a good day. So, thank you. I can't change what you hope for, but I appreciate that you're hoping I have a good one.
Or when someone tells you to have a good night, you're like, I have no control over this. I'll be asleep.
Yeah, I'll be asleep. I guess I could wake up and do something about it, but I don't want to do that. So to the topic at hand, now that we've distracted both of ourselves, cyber insurance, it's not working. It's unemployed right now. I'm kidding.
That was a dad joke, and it's not even here yet. Oh my gosh, man!
I'm leaning into it. So why isn't cyber insurance? You work at FifthWall. FifthWall does cyber insurance. Is one of the things that it does. Why isn't cyber insurance working?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. It's the kind of thing where you throw out some like catchphrase where people are like, oh, it's not working. Cyber insurance is broken. And the reason I think I did a post on this a while back. It's like cyber insurance kind of follows two paths here. You've got the rumor mill around cyber insurance where like there's this one comment that's made by some executive from some insurance company about the future state of cyber insurance, and everybody starts freaking out about it. It was like a year and a half ago. I think the president of Zurich or some other big insurance company is like, cyber insurance is going to be insolvent within 5 months. And every MSP in the channel was like, oh, cyber insurance thing is stupid. It's not even going to work anymore, blah, blah, blah. 5 months later, 5 months comes and goes, and cyber insurance is still wildly important. It had nothing, it's the nature of insurance is that it always adapts. I mean, there's consistent, you're a math guy, right? So you got all this actuarial data that's consistently being brought in. They're using it to adjust their models, adjust their pricing models, adjust their risk models, all this kind of stuff. So, adjust their risk requirements. There's all those different layers and pieces. So it's going to keep evolving, but it's evolving very rapidly. And so the reason I say it isn't working is because in the traditional insurance space where underwriting guidelines, they adjust a little bit. Like maybe you're in a flood zone now when you weren't 10 years ago, but you're not making changes to your underwriting models like every month. It's crazy how rapidly technology changes, which we know it's exponential compared to maybe these other pieces. And even cars, like you have automobile insurance, right? Technology progresses, but a lot of that technology makes the car safer. Whereas in the cyber insurance space, as the technology progresses, it actually gets worse. So it's this kind of thing where they're consistently having to adapt these models. There's all the new security measures that come out and they're trying to keep up with them, but their underwriting data is 2 years behind. So the traditional state of insurance and trying to map that onto cyber insurance is really what's broken.
It kind of sounds like insurance is a really bad solution for, I have cyber risk that I need to transfer to somebody else. And that's what insurance is. It's a transference of risk, right?
Yep.
And you bring up a really good point. I always bring up flood zones as it's like the odds that your floods, like the risk of your home getting damaged by a flood has fundamentally not changed over the last year, 5 years, 10 years, potentially 20. Like it's a reason why the phrase, it's like, oh, we're in 100-year floodplain. It's like, all right, it's not we're in 100-minute floodplain. Whereas if you look at cyber, it's we're however many minutes into a call, we're going to mention AI. Okay. So just note that 5 minutes in, we're mentioning AI. The introduction of new tools, of new capabilities, the cheapening of access to solutions, broadens the scope of problems that you have to be exposed to and you have to deal with. Whereas your cyber insurance policy still, like you said, actuaries are still crunching numbers from 2 years ago.
Just to comment on that, with the emergence of new technologies, with the emergence of even with new security measures, right? I mean, you've got all these security measures. Still, carriers are kind of looking at it as a check yes or no box, as if these security measures are very black and white. I mean, you're with Phin. Phin does security awareness training. The carrier says, do you engage in security awareness training? Yes or no, as if like you either are doing it or you're not doing it. And there's no like
in between.
There's no conversation about what the cadence of learning and what these lessons look like and what the actual exercises clients are doing look like. It's just a check yes or no box. And that's one of the issues right now is they're still adapting do you have daytime running lights on your car? Yes or no? And they're treating security controls as if it's this black and white answer like that, right? And it's not. And that's where the way that underwriting gets done needs to change. That's the big issue. And there are people who are there are companies and businesses kind of moving into that a little bit, right? So it's like, oh, we can monitor if you have different controls in place. We call it continuous underwriting, right? You have some insurance companies that are doing it themselves, right? It's like, but then you have these other two scenarios. One, you have the insurance company saying, hey, we can provide these security controls for you. So we've actually begun reselling our own security controls that a client can use in order to be a better risk for us so that we can get you a policy, right? And I don't like that idea because that removes a layer of client autonomy, being able to go to like an MSP and say, hey, I'm going to trust you to do the work and then I'll go get the insurance. Rather, it's I'm now bound to this insurance carrier because they provide my security for me, right? And they might not be getting the best pricing. They might not be getting the best coverage, just because their security is wrapped up in that insurance policy. So I don't like that. But then on the other side of it, you also have like security controls out there that are open source now, right? So now you have businesses that are like, oh, well, I need an EDR solution. So let me see what I can find. And they Google it and they find some open source EDR solution that's not very good. And they implement it because, well, the carrier says you need to have it. They can now check that box yes, and now they can get a policy. But are they still secure? And that's the issue. So there's a lot of pieces. We're not going to be able to unpack it all in 15 minutes, but let's lay it out there.
I always bring up your example of, technically you can say that you do EDR if you have SentinelOne, and technically it can do absolutely nothing for your business if it's in passive mode. So it's like, does your policy think you're secure? Yep. Did you create security? Are you a better risk? Probably not. Right. And do you think so? If insurance is a bad way to solve this new transference of risk because the risk actually changes so quickly, do you see a world where it's something other than insurance that allows this transference of risk? Not necessarily warranties, because I know that exists in the cyber insurance realm. It's not cyber insurance, as you've coached me, but is there something else? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think it's just going to be the way that insurance underwriting gets done, right? I mean, it can't stay in this black and white space. At the same time, insurance, if it continues in its normal model, insurance has always been a good faith agreement, right? You said, hey, I bought this vehicle. This vehicle has these security measures within it. It has seat belts. It has airbags. It has daytime running lights. It has those things. I filled out this application. I attest that these things are true. So for the life of the policy, these things will continue to remain true unless, there's a hardware failure I don't know about, right? It's like that kind of thing. So it's a good faith agreement and it's point in time, right? And it's currently, cyber insurance is the same way for the majority of carriers. It's not that way across the board, but for the majority of carriers, especially like the legacy ones, the big guys that everybody knows of, it's very point in time. Yes, I have MFA enabled at the time of this application being filled out. And now, as much as I would love to say, hey, everyone should have some continuous underwriting agent or API call or something on their system, right? I mean, those things exist. It's great. But at the same time, once a client fills out that application, they're saying, hey, for the life of the policy, I will maintain these security measures, right? So now it's being left on the client to make sure that those security controls stay in place. And this, in my mind, and sorry if this goes off topic, but in my mind, this is the opportunity for the MSP, right? That's where they can come in and they can literally be saying, hey, look, cyber insurance, you fill out that application. If any of those things you talked about change, if you attested to that stuff, if any of that changes, you might lose coverage, but I can keep it in place for you. It's this kind of thing where there's an opportunity there to really show value. And because the system is broken. If the system wasn't broken and they knew you turned off MFA, well, they can just tell you, hey, coverage is expiring because you turned off this control. But now, because they're saying, hey, I have this, the MSP has additional leverage to say, you said you have it, so you got to keep it.
If your clients have cyber insurance and you haven't looked at that policy to give them some guidance on you're lying or you're not, or actually you're good and here's why. Selfishly, from the vendor's point of view as well, from my point of view, it's you don't have to sell the security tools that are recommended to satisfy the requirements in your policy anymore, because it's not a nice to have. It is well, do you want cyber insurance or not? Because you have to do these things to keep it, or, maybe even reduce premiums.
Yeah.
A random thought I had. What if there exists a world where there's this not continuous underwriting, but is that the same thing as continuously binding? It's policies are typically a year in length, right? So what if you had to rebind a policy every month? And the way you'd rebind the policies, right? You set up this connection to your tools, and the way they're configured, the cyber insurance company would have to do this. And every month when it's we want to rebind the policy, it would check that those tools are still in place. So it's you do have coverage for a month. And if you lose coverage, you know why you lost coverage. And it's only also for a month. It's not for we're going to get to the end of a year. You're going to discover that something bad happened. And then we're going to go back and say, oops, sorry.
There was a month-long policy that you have the policy for a year, but every month there's going to be a checkup, right?
Yeah.
And said checkup checks to see not just if you still have the security controls you have in place, but if you've also added some new ones, and you're paying monthly now instead of annually. So your premium actually adjusts based on how good your security is over the course of the month, right? So let's say, and there could be a threshold that says, well, you actually remove these two things, which means you're now ineligible for the policy, right? So there's that piece too. I don't know. It's just, that's where you throw out ideas there. I just think there is a level of it where it's so rapidly changing that unless the underwriting kind of speeds up, it's going to continue to lag behind. And that's where you have what's called MGAs. You have managing general agents, authorities, underwriters, all sorts of things, right? You have these basically independent, small, we can call them insurtech if you want. I mean, FifthWall is kind of that too, where you're able to create your own policy based on what you understand the industry to be. And you have to go through all this legal red tape, and you still have to get backing from the bigger insurance carriers and all that kind of stuff. But then you're able to write policies to say, hey, this is how we're going to check into this. This is how we're going to make things happen. The problem is the big guys still aren't doing that, right? And they're the ones who need to start doing this, because even though we have the ability to write policies, and that's great, the majority of agents out there are going to be using one of the three big ones for the most part, and they're just going to go to them because it's easy. So unless those big insurance carriers can really start doing that, it's how good is this going to be? How effective is this going to be in the long run?
You had mentioned something earlier that I'd love to touch on, and that is there are these cyber insurance. I forget if you said underwriters or brokers that are also now providing services carriers that help satisfy the policy requirements that they bound.
Yeah, it's a little weird. So go ahead, ask your question.
Conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
It's kind of what
That's
I'm getting
what I thought
at.
the question I thought was going to be.
Yeah, conflicts of interest.
Potential conflicts of interest, but they avoid the conflict of interest because they'll say, let's say I'm the insurance carrier, right? So my name is Insurance Carrier Incorporated.
I already know what you're
right.
what you're
so
about
they'll
to say.
Yeah. My business. Oh, well, we're Insurance Carrier Incorporated, but the security is Insurance Carrier Security. It's a different company, right? And it's well, it's not. But also, it just goes back to what I was saying is think of the underwriting. The underwriting is saying, check these boxes. If you can check these boxes, you're a better risk. So we're going to provide the security controls that would allow you to check those boxes. I don't trust an insurance carrier to say, I trust an insurance carrier to provide a good policy. I don't trust an insurance carrier to provide me with continually maturing security to fit the risks of an ever-changing, evolving cybersecurity landscape. That's what I trust my cybersecurity provider to do, right? So I want both. I want a carrier who's providing me a good policy, but I want a cybersecurity provider who's actually looking out for the best interest of me today and in the long run, not just checking boxes to make me feel good, right? And that's the difference for me.
I'd immediately have a question for these underwriters or these carriers where it's like, so now you're providing cybersecurity tools, right, that in theory satisfy this policy. It's like, is that not just introducing way more risk to the carrier? It's like, now if you screw up, it's like, what is the, I'm just picturing like Brad Gross always says, it's like, what's the lawsuit look like? Would this be defensible? It's like, all right, why did you deny this policy? It's like, well, they got hacked and we didn't like the way they did this. It's like, well, they bought your cybersecurity services. So what's going on? Like, they followed everything you asked them to. What does that look like? It's like, not good for the carrier for sure.
No, doesn't look good. So I don't know. It just gets weird. And that's just where whenever I'm having these conversations with people, I was like, look, I know we always want to bundle things in. We're all about bundling in services because it saves us money, right? Potentially. But like, if I'm a carrier and I'm offering security controls, like, hey, you can save on your premium by using my security services, right? It's like, oh, that's great. I'm saving on your premium from your company. But there could be another carrier out there who would actually just charge me way less for a policy. And I'm missing out on that opportunity because I'm wrapping everything up in what you do. So it's almost like the ease of access is preventing us from that autonomy to actually go out and find the best option for us. And that's really, again, I always bring up the opportunity for the MSP. That's another one, right? Establish yourself as the cybersecurity provider, because now you come in, you say, hey, this is what I do. And that's going to allow you to shop for the best policy out there every time.
That makes a ton of sense. For folks who wanted to connect with you or connect with FifthWall, where would you suggest they go?
Yep. Again, we work a lot with MSPs, so fifthwallsolutions.com/MSP. And as I always say, linkedin.com/Wilbo, but the L is a number 1.
So we will have links to Wilbo and FifthWall Solutions in the show notes. If you'd like to reach out to Will, ask some questions about cyber insurance, or connect with FifthWall and do the same.
Yeah. It's funny, Wilbo, because my gamer tag is Wilbo Baggins.
Yeah.
And my Instagram handle. But when I first started dating my wife, a couple of her friends saw and thought it was Will Bobbagins and thought my last name was Bobbagins. And they said, if you marry this guy, is your name going to be Alana Bobbagins? And she's like, no.
That sounds like some kind of Dr. Seuss character.
I know.
Alana Bobbagins.
Alana Bobbagins.
Awesome. Will, it was great chatting with you. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your cyber insurance experience with us.
Always happy to be on. Thanks, Connor.
Anytime, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode. As always, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to Gone Fishing. If you want to find out more about high-quality security awareness training campaigns, how to launch them in ways that actually engage employees to change their habits, then check us out, Phin Security, at finsec.io. That's PHINSEC.io, or click all of the wonderful links in our show notes. Thanks for fishing with me today, and we'll see you next time.